Sir John Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was elected to this place in a free and fair election, and I come here and say not what I'm asked to, not what I'm told to, but what I believe. Similarly, my constituents make representations to me in a free and open way, fearlessly. They sometimes agree with me and sometimes they disagree with me. And part of the glory of our democracy is that we can exchange views, that we can learn from others, that we can disagree openly and fairly and without, as I said, fear. And that would have been taken as read as a way of describing not just this place and our representative democracy, but the character of a free society, a society in which we're all proud to live. At least I could have said that until very recently. But now all is altered. In our university, women are intimidated for simply saying that sex is a biological fact. Academics are intimidated, silenced sometimes, for championing our history and our heroes. And worst of all, which brings me to my honourable friend's amendment, we now have people arrested for praying, interrogated by the police, asked what they're praying about, what they're thinking. This is, as my honourable friend said, dystopian. It's like a mix of Huxley, Philip Dick and Orwell. It is unthinkable that we should be living in a society where what people think has become a matter of police interest, but more than that, not merely a matter of police inquiry. The lady concerned was arrested and charged. She went to court. Of course, in the end, she was acquitted, but that's not the point. The very fact that she could have been arrested for what she thought, for praying, is, in a much overused word, chilling. I happily give way to my
grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. Surely the point that we have to be careful about is the use of words, as the honourable lady, who I regard as a personal friend, did use, words like impede. Thinking and praying is not impeding. Actually shouting and live streaming and doing offensive things to people going to have a procedure is impeding. And if I understand the amendment that's been put down by my honourable friend who introduced this part of the proceedings, he is only talking about things that do not impede. I think that's right, and that's the only basis on which I could vote for this amendment. My right honourable friend, I should say, will be pleased but not surprised, given that he knows me so well, to hear that I entirely agree with it. I would not support loud, aggressive protests outside abortion clinics. They do take place in some other countries. The evidence in this country is extremely thin that they take place here, and indeed a previous health secretary conducted a review to establish that fact. But if that was in any way likely or possible, or made more possible by this amendment, I wouldn't be speaking in support of it. So my right honourable friend is entirely right. This is about peaceful, silent protest. And in moving this bill, I will give way again in a moment, if my right honourable friend will allow me. In moving this bill at its inception, the government rightly said they were doing so because they were against violent, disruptive protests. They had in mind people gluing themselves to roads, stopping ambulances, or rushing to save lives. And I support this bill. I support its objectives because that kind of disrupted and violent process is incompatible with a free and open and peaceful society. But it is extraordinary that simultaneously, having said that they were in favour of peaceful protest, because that was the defence, we're in favour of an open society, different opinions, the right to put your case, to protest peacefully, the government now is failing to support an amendment tabled by my right honourable friend because the government refused to table it, to protect people's right to protest in the very peaceful, very indeed silent way, which a few weeks ago they were saying that they were prepared to defend. I'll give way first to the right honourable gentleman, then to the honourable lady.
I am most grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way, but can I ask him as a matter of interpretation of this amendment? Because it seems that this amendment will create exactly the kind of conflicts and disruption to public peace that it is intended to avoid. If somebody kneels ostentatiously to pray in front of someone on their way to an abortion clinic, what is that intended to do? And yet this amendment says such communication or prayer shall not without more be taken to be influencing any person's decision. Why else would somebody kneel down and pray in front of a woman on the way to an abortion clinic unless it was intended to influence that person's decision? I think that there is a balance to be struck here between the rights of people who pray, like him and me, and the rights of people trying to avail themselves of a perfectly legal service to which they have a right.
Well, I don't know how often the right honourable gentleman prays, maybe more often than I do, although my need to do so is probably greater. But he must understand that prayer does two things. It sends a message, one hopes, to the Almighty, and it provides solace for the person praying. So it may well be the person praying outside this clinic is sending a message, but that message is just as likely to be a transcendental one as it is to any individual in the proximity of the place. And the idea that we should interrupt the relationship between an individual and their God seems to me to be pretty monstrous, particularly as the amendment in the name of the Honourable Member for Northampton South specifically says that any activity, communication or prayer shall not influence any person's decision or more especially obstruct or impede any person. So this is not about interfering with another, this is about expressing a view to oneself, to the Lord, to others perhaps, but that can be said of any prayer at any time. Are we going to arrest people in other public places? Once this is allowed, I will give way in a second. Once this is permitted, the police are permitted to arrest people for what they think and what they are praying about. Why not arrest them in other public places? Why does it have to be just abortion clinics? Once you open this door, why wouldn't the police arrest people outside mosques or outside temples? Why wouldn't they arrest them in any other public space where they're praying to express a view or opinion, or indeed, as I said, to express it not horizontally, but vertically, to a greater power above us? I give way to Honourable Lady because I said I would.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. This is an extremely important point, I think, at the moment. I do not believe anyone in this House wants to restrict anyone's right to pray. But what we are trying to differentiate is the impact of that action on the women going in for a very traumatic experience, many of whom will be grieving, many of whom will have been through a traumatic experience to get them to this point, to then be presented with someone who is telling them they are doing the wrong thing and increasing that trauma. And regardless of the intention of the person praying, which I would defend forever, it is the impact on the women which is the problem.
But you see, in a free society, impact we make on others by our sentiments, by what we express and do, by what we say, and indeed what we pray about, is the inevitable consequence of the openness which I would have thought in this place we all celebrate. In this case, the amendment specifically says that we shouldn't influence or obstruct. But the more general context here, the context in which we're having this debate, is a world in which the ability to express a view that others might find offensive or unreasonable is being curbed every single day as our freedom is being eroded, and all the things we hold dear are at risk. I won't give way again because I see the Deputy Speaker is not on her feet but edging in her chair and asking me to bring my remarks to a conclusion. Let me say this, that freedom is not about the capacity to hear from others with whom you agree. A free and open society is about one in which you hear from those with whom you don't agree.
That freedom is at risk. This amendment is most reasonable, and I urge the House to accept it with these final words from John Buchan, the author. No, I won't give way because the Speaker is telling me not to. With these final words from the author and statesman John Buchan. He said, "While we may think a wall as solid as earth separates civilization from barbarism, the division is a thread, a sheet of glass. Today I will vote against barbarism by voting for this amendment. I mission everyone in this chamber to exercise their conscience and vote for the amendment with me."